everyone. Welcome to Global Express. So here we are, a day after Prime Minister Narendra Modi delivered his historic address on Capitol Hill to the joint houses of Congress, preceded by the rock star reception he was given at the White House and the Mo-Jo Jill bonding. They were holding hands. If there's one thing that is absolutely crystal clear, it is this. Despite all the so-called hesitations of history and the carping over India under Prime Minister Modi turning India into an illiberal democracy, Washington knows and understands that India is and will always be a democracy, warts and all, as they now freely admit that they are too. Which brings us to the big question. What does India get out of this partnership? Today on Global Express, we have Nirupama Rao, the highly respected diplomat who served as India's ambassador to Beijing and Washington. She will take us through the visit that the Prime Minister has already described as path-breaking. So, the common catchphrase as ambassador is, are always used in these joint statements and media briefings, rich in form, rich in substance. How would you look at it, Ambassador? What are the pitfalls ahead? Could it run aground? It's taken 18 years to get to this pass. What do you see as happening going forward?
Thank you, Nina. Well, you referred to the 18 years that it had taken for us to get to this stage. And I'm glad you mentioned that point, because this is a many-storied relationship. And the structure has been added on to over the years. And that is the first point that you have to keep in mind. Now, as far as the official state visit of Prime Minister Modi to Washington is concerned, the ongoing state visit, obviously, there's been a lot of pomp and circumstance surrounding the visit. But sifting through that, you have to really look at the brass tacks and the outcomes from the visit. Of course, it may be a little too early to pass judgment on those outcomes. And in fact, much of what we see in terms of implementation will be played out in months and years to come. So let's keep that in mind, separating all the hoopla that we see before us at the moment. I liked your reference to Mojo. That was brilliant. So
it's for my headline. It's for my headline in the newspaper.
So I'd like to use the word consequential, which was something that I think President Biden used when he described the partnership. So it is a consequential partnership, a partnership that generates consequences, meaning that it's productive. Yes. It's a productive partnership. And it is a pillar partnership in the geopolitics of the world today, looking at the churn that surrounds us, looking at the Indo-Pacific, looking at the Indian Ocean situation, looking at the rise of China. And keeping all that in mind, looking at what we as democracies, India and the United States, are aiming at as far as building this relationship is concerned. I think you have to keep that perspective in mind. And this is a partnership. Now, I noticed that President Biden talked about a partnership grounded in democracy, in human rights, in freedom, in rule of law. And I think those phrases were repeated. They kept coming up. They were more.
No, but is that also Nirupama, because there were these prods by all the columnists, both at home and the US, saying that Washington is held back from a public dressing down on the curbs on religious and media freedom. I mean, even Barack Obama, he said that this should be talked up. So Biden, I think, has done the delicate balancing act by saying that they were going to talk about it in private rather than make a big deal of it in public. It's a smart move, I think. After all, he did call Xi Jinping a dictator just a day after, Antony Blinken's visit to Beijing. So walk softly, but no stick.
Tread softly, but carry a big stick, as Teddy Roosevelt used to say.
Yeah.
But I noticed that in his remarks at the press conference, the joint press conference, while they answered questions on human rights and religious freedom, I noticed that Mr. Biden mentioned challenges faced by both countries. And I think he put it very diplomatically, very elliptically, when he talked about the challenges to human rights, democratic values, press freedom. He mentioned press freedom,
Yes.
religious freedom, tolerance and diversity. So it's sort of embedded, those words are embedded in this joint statement, which really is all sweetness and light otherwise, in terms of all that the two governments are going to do. And more importantly, I think looking beyond these issues of democratic values, if you look at the actual meat and potatoes in the statement, it's essentially the critical and emerging technology cooperation, which will form the pillar of the partnership. And I think that is where the action is going to be, not only on defense and security, which of course, the GEF 414 jet engines production in India, sharing transfer of technology with India, which is huge implications. It means generations of jet fighters produced for our Air Force, our fighting arm, will have American jet engines, which is a great milestone, I think, and we'll have to see how it plays out in terms of how the HAL will be prepared for this, how the US Congress will clear all the formalities associated
with
to transfer of technology. So in a sense, the devil is always in the detail, but I think we have to take strength from the fact that these outcomes, which really point to critical technology cooperation between India and the United States, both two democracies, against what has happened vis-a-vis US and China. When you look at the CHIPS Act, when you look at what is happening, when Jake Sullivan talks of a small yard with a high fence, it's essentially, I think India is being admitted into that small yard. And I think we have to take, as I said, that is a very positive development.
So do you believe, I mean, you've served in China, you know it inside out. Do you feel that Xi Jinping has blundered, with this wolf warrior diplomacy and, this whole business of, beefing up and making a mess in Ladakh and Galwan? Do you think he's gone too far in pushing it? Because China was and is to a great extent even today the beneficiary of US all of this technology and so on and so forth. So do you think he's blundered? And I mean, in fact, India is now being pushed literally into the US's arms.
Well, I don't know if India would, be pushed. I mean, India is not a country that really can be pushed into anybody's arms.
Nudged then.
maybe it is sidestepping a little, maybe going a little closer to the US. That may be the case. And yes, when it comes to what China under Xi Jinping, I remember a few weeks ago, I think the editor of The Economist, who just returned from China, called it a one-man state. We generally refer to China as a one-party state because it's ruled by the Communist Party. But she said it's very much a one-man state. And I think that is a statement I'm ready to accept in terms of how you see the mark, the imprint of, it's like Xi Jinping was here on everything that the Chinese do say geopolitically, in terms of their foreign policy, in terms of what they proclaim to the world, in terms of the control on the population within China. You saw that during the COVID.
In fact, that's exactly what I was going to get to. There's also this going around, another story I read, which said that the young people are refusing to cooperate. They're sort of lying low. And they're not participating in the in the whole workforce and the willingness that was there in the generation that preceded them. And that is actually also a very dangerous trend.
And China's economic growth is slowing down, and one does hear reports of joblessness, especially among the trained population, students and graduates who've come out of universities. Jobs are not that easily available. So, of course, one doesn't get to see and hear much of what is happening in China, there's a great deal of control on the dissemination of news, as you know, and the internet is there are internet nannies all around in China. So, you're not able to really get the word of how but I'm sure within the Chinese youth particularly, and those, who are connected via modern telecommunications to each other, I'm sure there are many code words to describe and explain what they feel. It's quite interesting. That is can be the subject of another discussion. But yes, Xi Jinping, I think, has in a way devoided China of its friends, really. And all across the world, China is viewed so differently from what it was 10 years ago, a decade ago. And this has to do, you have to attribute it to the policies of the leadership and the impact and effect of China's policies in our region when it comes to maritime disputes, when it comes to the dispute over the border with India, when it comes to wolf warrior diplomacy and the way the Chinese have operated in our neighborhood. You've seen, with the Belt and Road and the very, I would call it in many ways, a diplomacy or foreign policy based on naked self-interest and devoid of any values, although boilerplate statements out of Beijing will always talk in a holier than thou way about how China is blemishless and China is doing good for the rest of the world. They talk.
No, Prime Minister Modi, when he gave this speech at the Congress, he made a side swipe at Pakistan because saying home of terror, and he also took a side swipe at China. But there was not even a word against Russia. So I mean, I understand perfectly about India's position vis-a-vis Pakistan and China. Where do we actually stand on Russia? You've written a brilliant piece in Foreign Affairs also on the subject. It's quite interesting to see this not unraveling, but sort of the idea that we could actually divest ourselves of our Russian links in the years to come, if not right away, because of their their invasion of Ukraine. Where do we go with that?
Even as we talk about a trusted partnership with the United States, which of course is a statement of fact, there is also this partnership with Russia, which dates back to the Soviet times, and which is one of the pillars of our foreign policy. The foreign minister, Dr. Jaishankar, referred to the relationship with Russia a few days or weeks ago as a cardinal principle of our foreign policy. So, Russia is not the past as far as we are concerned. Russia is very much the present and could be part of our future too, because, Russia and India, this is a legacy relationship, but it's a legacy relationship that is still, yielding, is productive for us because we have our defense linkages with Russia, and post the Ukraine crisis, with the energy security questions that have been the fallout of the Ukraine crisis, this has resulted in India importing so much more crude oil from Russia, as you know, and we refine it and we sell it also, some of it to European nations. But we've kept below the price cap. It's not that we violated sanctions. There are no sanctions. One must recall, contrary to popular belief, there are no sanctions against buying Russian crude. It's just that we have to keep to that price cap because,
But there was a threat
the
of
West doesn't want Russian crude to be sold at a high price, but it wants Russian crude to be, because it doesn't want to help Putin. It wants to reduce its revenues. But it wants Russian crude to be sold because if we completely cut off supplies of Russian oil, can you imagine the price of oil worldwide would go up to $200 a barrel? Maybe, it would be hugely negative in terms of its impact for all of us, regardless of whether we're east or west, north or south. And we in the global south, I think, are particularly concerned about these things. And India has led the way, which I had referred to in my article in Foreign Affairs. Also, India sees itself as the heartland of the global south.
So India also wants to be, I mean, I've always wondered, I mean, I see America, positioning India as a sort of bulwark against China, both in the Indian Ocean and, in the Malacca Straits and on our territorial border. But are we also what do we get out of this relationship? I mean, is it becoming the defense manufacturer or the tech power? What are we aiming at? What do we get out of being, taking on this role as a policeman, so to speak, of the Indian Ocean?
No, I don't really think that is the aim when we talk of trusted partnerships with the United States. And the fact that both our countries are creating what Condoleezza Rice said more than 2 decades ago, a balance of freedom in the Indo-Pacific. Given the rise of China and the tensions that have been generated as a result of that rise and China's, actions, not only in our neighborhood, but across the region. So a strong strategic partnership, as it's called, between India and the United States helps us. It helps our defense and security. Take intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, ISR. We are hoping to purchase those 30 MQ-9B Predator zones from General Atomics, from the US, and that is really going to be will help on our land borders. It will help as far as our maritime security is concerned. I think it augments our capability to defend ourselves. And when we talk of a defense industrial partnership with the US, and we are talking of Make in India and trying to build our own Atmanirbhar as far as defense production is concerned, the transfer of technology that we hope will be flowing as a result of this partnership in critical and emerging technologies between our two governments, between the private sectors, and with academic establishments also contributing to research and development. I think this is a whole new chapter in the relationship.
That's right. Even that investment, the investment by Micron Technology,
absolutely.
825 million by a US chip maker. That's remarkable. That
Yes,
then sets up that semiconductor.
Absolutely. And something that seems to have missed, I think, the headlines is this, India being invited to become the newest member of the Mineral Security Partnership. And this is partnership on...
What is that?
Yes, that is partnership on critical minerals that go into the semiconductor industry, like
lithium,
like cobalt, like graphite. Now, this mineral security partnership had been established, I think, a year or so ago by the United States and its close allies and friends. And India had been excluded from that. And it is, I think, a positive development to see India included in that, because that will also help develop sustainable critical energy minerals and the supply chains associated with that, with India also being a part of it.
In fact, Ambassador, that's a very interesting point, because I remember when I was talking to people in Afghanistan straight after the Americans withdrew, one of the things that they brought up again and again is that the lithium mines in Afghanistan were being tapped by the Chinese through the Taliban, and that this whole the pathway out was to take it from Afghanistan through Pakistan and then to China. So China is the biggest beneficiary actually of the the evacuation of America from Afghanistan.
Talking of China becoming the biggest beneficiary, you talked about Russia and India. Now, the West perhaps doesn't look at it this way, but with the crisis in Ukraine and the West's complete preoccupation with that crisis, and Russia being relatively boxed in as a result, China is a totally free hand as far as Eurasia is concerned, as far as our region is concerned. Not many people focus on that, which is exactly why India has to keep its connections open with Russia.
That's very interesting.
To leave Russia in the lurch. I mean, Russia can be accused and regarded guilty for all the transgressions of Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty, human rights violations, and all the destruction that has emanated that has been the result of this war. But keep in mind that Russia is a pole as far as our multipolar world situation is concerned. And you just can't afford it to go down like that, because the Chinese are going to be the biggest beneficiaries of that kind of outcome.
And there's also this people-to-people connect. I mean, the Indian diaspora, I mean, the major drivers of this relationship are the Indian origin, politicians and people, members of the Senate and the Congress who've pushed it. And
two of them running for president, in fact.
Yes, but Nikki Haley has actually trashed Modi. She's made some very impolitic remarks on Modi. I haven't actually read it. I just saw a tweet on it. But I think there is also a pushback from some of the Indian origin people. But I mean, there's education, there's visas, there are new consulates, and then of course you have all these people who head the IT companies and all of that. Was it like that when you served in Washington? I mean, was there the same kind of push and same kind of excitement that existed at that point, or is this a new thing?
Well, I think you could certainly see the signs of things to come, and you already had Indian American members of Congress at that time. And you had for instance Sri Srinivasan, who was then considered likely to even become a Supreme Court judge. Of course, he didn't ultimately do that, but a very brilliant young lawyer. And so and then there was Satya Nadella. When I was ambassador, he was already just become head of Microsoft. You had Indra Nui heading PepsiCo. Mm-hmm. So you did have prominent Indian Americans. So this was already a factor in the relationship. The role of the Indian American diaspora has been hugely important for the growth of this relationship. And they are in the American mainstream. When you have members of Congress, members of the House, and hopefully soon members of the Senate, and then you have Nikki Haley, people like Nikki Haley running for president of the United States. It's a whole new dimension that the diaspora gets to occupy as a result, and it's a very prosperous diaspora. It's very well qualified, and there's a very, very positive impression and image that they enjoy among the American public, and that generates, obviously, assets as far as India is concerned. They're a huge asset to this relationship.
So final word, if you can just tell us what your biggest takeaway is from this visit. What is it that makes us a stronger, better nation? Being a part of this, not alliance, but, grouping.
Well, I think the comprehensive global strategic partnership, as it's called, between India and the United States generates a lot of benefit for India's growth and development. It is important for our partnership with the United States, with India being an equal contributor. There are no junior partners in this setup. We are equal partners with the United States, and we together can contribute a great deal to peace and security in the Indo-Pacific. And the fact that we're democratic countries, I think, sends out a very strong message. Open, accessible, transparent. For all our flaws and shortcomings, every democracy has that. But ultimately, it's that critical mass that we bring to bear on the world. When Mr. Modi talks of world as one family, I think this kind of a relationship, a bilateral relationship between two of the world's largest democracies, can really make a difference. And then ultimately, I'd say that it's the people-to-people ties that bind our two countries. People are at the heart of this endeavor, and almost every field of human endeavor is now being covered by this relationship. And there are solid as I said, consequences that emanate from that, whether it's in education, whether it's in health, whether it's in critical emerging technologies, and defense and security, and of course, clean energy and
Yes.
policies, in order to reach net zero, in order to promote decarbonization, in order to reduce methane emissions, all the work that we are doing together with, and also within the International Solar Alliance, which the United States has also joined. So these are all, pillars of this relationship. So it's not just, as I said, not the pomp and show just of an official state visit. That, of course, really adds color and a lot of spectacle to this. But at the heart, at the core, look at the core of this relationship and look at the benefits that come to both our countries from what we do.
In fact, I love the way that Modi toasted Jill Biden for taking care of his meals, at the dinner, which was very heartfelt. So I think the bond between the Bidens and Modi is also quite a surprise. It really is an eye-opener on how these kind of synergies are the ones that actually take relationships forward.
Absolutely.
Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate you coming on the show, and I hope we can do this again, Sean, as soon as we can.
Thank
All
you.
right. Bye-bye. Thanks. Bye.